Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10:01, so let's get started with this Wednesday webinar. Good morning to you all, first of all. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to attend this webinar, which really is all about the coexistence of internal and external valuations and how they can be managed together in Chalkstring. Okay, get my mouse working. So, as I say, firstly, welcome to everybody. If you're new to GoToMeeting, then hopefully you heard an announcer when you joined the meeting or the webinar. If you didn't hear it, please do check your audio settings, and you can see that in the screen on the right side there. If you just double check your microphone and your speakers, I say the microphone, you will be muted during the webinar. There'll be the option to throw questions to us if you want to via the chat box, but please just check your speakers, make sure that you can hear us, and ideally, if you could use a headset, you'll be able to hear it for the best experience. And if you minimize all your other windows down, then you should be able to maximize the screen and take the full effect of this webinar. So a bit of housekeeping first of all. So firstly, an introduction to me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Barry Chapman. I'm one of the directors and one of the co-founders of Chalkstring. I have a background in engineering and quantity surveying, and obviously you can see my LinkedIn profile if you wish to. You can have a look at me, but I think a lot of you on the webinar do know me. There's my contact details if I'm needed for any reason, but I'll be hosting this webinar today and talking you through the webinar, and obviously happy to answer any questions you might have. So the agenda today is relatively brief, to be fair. This is going to be a relatively short webinar. We're going to be touching briefly on valuations and applications and just having a look at some of the challenges around those, first of all, because that's the main focus of this webinar. I'm then going to give a very brief introduction to Chalkstring, and I do mean brief, but just for anyone who's on the call who's not aware about the product, just to try and explain what it does. And then we'll focus very much on the valuations part of it, which is obviously what this webinar is all about, and then open up the floor, as I say, to questions and answers. So quite a short webinar this morning, probably about 30 minutes end to end, comprising some slides, which we'll get into now, and also obviously a live software demonstration. So that's today's agenda. So first of all, let's look at valuations and applications. And really, I'm coming at this really from a specialist subcontractor's point of view. Most of our work and certainly our target customer set really is specialist subcontractors. And I think most people on this webinar looking at the attendance list sort of fall into that category. So I'm doing this mainly from a specialist subbies background. And I think probably stating the obvious to start with, but it's probably worth just going through this because this sort of sets the scene for what we'll go through into the software, is that obviously getting paid is a pretty well-trodden path, which I would hope all of us are very comfortable with. I've broken it really into three main sections. So there's the progress side of that, of assessing what's been done on site, so what's actually been completed, generally through a walk around site and updating that site progress. Obviously, most trades would want to break down the work into different fixes, first fix, second fix, third fix, etc. Whatever those fixes are called, but ultimately be measuring the work in a number of different stages or visits to site. A lot of that, of course, is supported by photographic evidence and tracking and logging issues and snags and those sorts of things as you walk around. But ultimately, that site progress, which is done typically once a month, obviously is then the basis of the internal valuation. So hopefully we're all very comfortable with that concept of progress. Then on the internal valuation side of things, obviously this is very much your true position of where you stand as a business, as a contractor at that point in time, looking at obviously your cost and your value. So we're into obviously cost value reconciliations, or CVRs, and other sort of key performance indicators, other measures, things like your cost to completes and projected margins and those sorts of things. But ultimately, this is your internal true position of the business, and it's very much about your current standing at that point. So therefore, it's used to do things like measure your subcontractor claims. So presumably, you'd want to only pay your subcontractors for the work they've done, or your labour-only subcontractors for the work they've actually done. So this is the benchmark or the internal valuation to be able to measure and make sure you're not overpaying your subcontractors. And of course, then that becomes in itself the basis of your external valuation out to your client. So on the external valuation or application for payment, and obviously a lot of this terminology we all know is very interchangeable. This clearly is an interim payment request to your client to get payment made for that month's work, and clearly it has to include a lot of detail to substantiate it all. So a detailed breakdown of work done, value, all the variations you've been instructed, materials on site if relevant, all that sort of thing. And obviously that then turns into either a payment certificate or a pay less notice, depending on your client. But the key thing here, I guess, is the fact that very often that external valuation, which of course is done for a different purpose than your internal valuation, will or may include an element of overbooking or overvaluing. And of course, there's a number of reasons why you might wish to do that. You might have walked around site middle of the month for various reasons, and you might be projecting your position at the end of the month. So you might need to overbook sort of a week or 2 weeks in advance. Or of course, you might just be trying it on and trying to get a bit more cash in a bit earlier in the contract to help with cash flow, and two very legitimate reasons that we hear all the time. But the point is, you need to be able to overvalue or overbook. And that therefore means obviously your external valuation is potentially very different to your internal valuation, and that's of course the basis of this main thrust of this webinar, is how those two can coexist and how you can do it efficiently. So common feedback we hear from customers when we're talking about the valuations process is things like, they're saying, well, we do a month-end valuation, we don't talk to us in the last week of the month because we're super busy. And the kind of things we hear are things like it's quite an outdated process. So a lot of Excel spreadsheets being used. People are just saying, look, it's very manual. It's time consuming. One recent customer came on board a while back, said to us that they take a week out at the end of every month just to do valuations in their applications. So it's clearly a very intense, time consuming process. It is error prone, and again, something we hear regularly is customers saying that we've got so many variations flooding around on these projects nowadays, it's very hard to keep on track of them, and one missed variation that's not charged for can damage obviously the profitability on the job quite significantly. So it is error prone, it is risking human interaction, so that's another complaint we hear quite regularly. Inconsistency, certainly in larger organizations where companies are putting more of a sort of control framework in place, people are wanting to see more consistency across the various different surveying teams. So you've got consistent feel and look and reporting process for applications and valuations and so on. So providing inconsistency. Inefficiency is something else we hear quite a lot about, where we're seeing more and more customers now wanting to involve their site managers or their contracts managers in helping this process of doing valuations, not trying to turn them into quantity surveyors, clearly, but enabling them to use their boots on the ground to be able to drive the valuations and record what's been done without the cost and the effort of sending out surveyors onto site. So there's an element there of, are you using your staff as effectively as possible? Obviously, there's a complexity to this with more modern projects with such complexity of work scope and big projects with so many different zones and variations and so on. And we're back to this whole thing about overbooking and managing both the internal and the external valuation. There's a complexity there, and traditionally a piece of software or an Excel file doesn't enable you to do that in an effective way. And ultimately, it's just hard work. Because things like materials on site, if they're relevant to your contract, of course, generally are a manual process. So somebody's got to calculate materials on site, or indeed walk around site and count them up maybe, but that's just very, very manual. So what we're hopefully going to show in this session really is how all those things can be streamlined by this process and have this coexistence of both the internal true position and the external for the application for payment. So today what we'll be showing is these sorts of things. So the ability to visualize your site progress in a very graphical format. And I'll be going through this in the software, but you can hopefully start to see there straight away. You've got a list of all the work scope and all the different zones, and we can see a status of each piece of work. Let's say I'll go into that in more detail. The ability to look graphically and visually at how your whole project is performing using what we call progress maps. Again, these are just colored charts to show you how the project is developing. So very quickly, you've got that high level overview of status. We can record progress by individual product, or we can group products together. If you've got big complex projects, you want to sort of streamline even further and simplify your work. You can group items together to make life a lot easier, a lot quicker. Ultimately, really, this is all about walking around sites with an iPad in your hands or a tablet in your hands, moving progress sliders. So hopefully you can see on that graphic that's just come up, you can see these little slider bars, just walking around site, updating those, and that is essentially deriving your value. And you can log issues and take photographs and attract all that information into the project as appropriate as you're walking around. So updating site progress is really simple, and we'll go through that. From an internal valuation perspective, it's about instantly creating your live valuation reports, which go to quite a lot of detail on progress status and value. As you can see there on that report there, that table. Hopefully you can see there's a lot of detail regarding, and this has got some SFS panels in it, but again, this could be anything. But this has got a breakdown of all the work, the value, the different zones, the different fixes, and ultimately it's being broken down by work package as well. It includes all variations, all materials on site. And these things are produced automatically using Chalkstring. So once you've walked around site with an iPad, these things get generated for you. It ultimately then is driving things like your value and your costs. So that top right graph you can now see is a mechanical electrical project, but you can see in there you've got projected revenue, certified revenues, etc. And it's giving you that basis of your CVR automatically. So all your accrued costs, all your approved costs, all your projections, etc. And also it's giving you a preview of the basis of your external valuation or your application for payment if you were to produce it at this point. So this is an internal valuation giving you the basis of your CVR with the basis, as I say, also of the external application if you produced it. And then the third thing we'll be covering then is the external valuations themselves. Excuse me. So applications are generated automatically with a single mouse click. There's a screenshot of the button just to show you. That will produce a fully detailed application for payment, but you do have the option to overvalue if desired. So you can put in your own percentages. So we can see on this screenshot here, we've only done 67% of the work, but actually we're claiming for 100% because we've manually overridden these progresses. So straight away, what we're seeing is the software stores the actual true position and your applied position. You've got options for things like residential formats. So if you are doing residential work, and I know there's quite a few of you on this call who are involved in the residential sector, if you're doing plots and houses, these sorts of things down the left here, you've got this kind of more traditional matrix format for your application, which I know a lot of you will be very familiar with. But equally, if you're doing commercial work, you could have opt for the commercial format as well, which is a more traditional commercial route where you've got your products listed down and you've got a more commercial bill. So you've got those sorts of options in the system depending on the work you're doing. Ultimately, the software is storing the status of every application that you have generated together with all the certification, payment status, etc. So we can see here this particular project, we've got 4 applications for payment, all gone to Kier Construction. 3 of them have been paid, 1's been approved, and you've got your cumulative totals over on the right-hand side stating your position with regards to your applications on that contract. And finally, the software will also calculate for you your retention, your CIS, your tax, etc., based off the information you tell it regarding the project and your client, etc. So all that information is managed for you on the external valuations. And these are the things we will go through in the software. So very briefly, I'm not going to go on in detail about this, but for anyone who doesn't know Chalkstring, it's an integrated project cost management system, and it's built for specialist subcontractors primarily. It's a cloud-based system, so it's all based on Amazon Web Services, so you can host and get hold of the data anytime you want to from anywhere on any device. And it's about having a single product from cradle to grave for your project. So very simply, it's about that central set of up-to-date, real-time, cloud-based data, and everybody in your organization can access that. And clearly, it's worth saying that everybody can be controlled in terms of permissions and access rights, so depending on what you want people to see and do. But ultimately, everyone in your team or your business is accessing one single set of data, one point of data input, and it's all inextricably linked, integrated together. So there's no manual transferring of data between spreadsheets and so on. And it's iOS compatible, it's Android compatible, so you can be using tablets and phones and stuff on site. So it's a web-based system for managing your projects. In terms of the whole scope of what the software does, at the center of Chalkstring, you would have a database of your materials and your suppliers and your pricing, so information that's very pertinent to your business. That information is then used when you are pricing or estimating a project and ultimately setting your budgets for the job. So pre-contract, it would use that information to help you tender the job and set all your budgets. And then when the job goes live and it becomes a real contract, all that information is in the software at that point. So then you're into the ability to review the tender and make any adjustments, add variations, drive your material bills and create POs and that sort of thing on the procurement side of things. You can track delivery tickets and invoices, drive your progress and your valuations, obviously, which is today's focus, generate applications for payment, and also manage how you pay your subcontractors and make sure you're only paying them what they're due. So those are the main facets of what Chalkstring is all about. And then it ultimately takes all that information and displays all this data to you in a series of real-time job costing kind of dashboards or live CVRs, so you can see the position of your project in detail every time. And ultimately, that information then talks to accountancy software. And those are the four most commonly used ones, but obviously there are many others and we can talk to them all. So for the purpose of today, that's what Chalkstring is all about. We're going to focus totally onto the progress valuations and applications part of the product. If you want to know more about other parts of the software, please let us know. We have had other webinars on other parts, and we'll continue to do this webinar series. So if we go across to the software now, okay, so this is Chalkstring. So hopefully you can see here, we got a web address at the top here. I'm using Google Chrome here. So this then is the live software you're seeing now as a cloud-based solution. Two sides to the software. You've got this black toolbar, which is all about managing your off-site side of your projects. But for today's purposes, if we go into the database, we have a look at, have a look at the projects today. Pick a project. So let's use this Radisson Hotel Southampton project. Then what I'm going to do for the purpose of today's session is I'm going to focus purely on the commercials of this particular contract. So this is, as I say, it's a Radisson Hotel Southampton. Obviously, all my data is fictitious for obvious reasons regarding confidentiality. And these are the main menu you use to drive your project commercials. But really for today's perspective, what we'll be really focusing on is the progress part and the applications for payment. So within the software, immediately you can start to see you've got a whole load of metrics, which I'm not going to go into detail today. That's covered in a different webinar. But it is worth just dropping back and saying that for clarity, and for anyone who's not seen Chalkstring before, what drives the whole system is work packages. So if I just take this ceilings work package and I look at the rate build-up, this is then the scope of work. So in this particular case, this is a ceilings work package, but it could be anything. It could be electrical, it could be screed, it could be roofing. But within this work package, I've defined 3 bill items that we need to build. So we've got MF ceiling, grid and tile, and perimeter. Each of those has a rate build up against it. And of course, each of those then has a quantity against them as well. So if we go into the quantity, you can then see those are the project quantities split out across, in this case, 5 different levels of this building in this particular case. So it's rate build-ups and quantities. And the final thing, just before we push on from this, is you can see you've got these rates in here. So the MF ceiling here, we can see has been costed at £19.85 is the price to build it. And we're selling that on to our client at £26.86. So it's worth just showing that inside that, you've got a detailed breakdown of all the component materials and labor you need to build that item. But the purpose of showing this really isn't to try and get into this sort of detail, but it's to show that each item can be broken down into different fixes. So you can see, first of all, we've got a metal fix there, first fix if you like, and then we've got a second fix, which in this case is boarding, and then we've got a third fix, which is plastering. And the purpose for highlighting that is because anything you're doing can be broken down into different fixes, which becomes obviously very important when you start to measure the progress on site. So without any further ado, if we go into the progress section, so let's imagine now we've done some work on site and we're walking around and we're looking at our monthly valuations. By simply selecting the work package you want to see, whichever one it might be, this then gives us a status of our project at this point in the contract. So you've got a list of your products down the left-hand side, and there could be hundreds of these, obviously. You've got lots of different filters and ways in which you can filter by zones and products to see whatever you need to on the screen. But you can see you've now got a very graphical view of each of these. So for example, if I'm stood on, let's say, level 4 of the MF ceiling, I can very quickly, or if you wanted to, you could very quickly filter out different zones if you want to. So we can say I'm looking now at level 4, level 5. So very quickly, I'm looking at what I need to work on. If I were to go into the MF ceiling and say, let's see what we've done here, Well, at the moment, you can see we've not done any work on level 4 MF ceiling. So the 3 components I've just shown you are all on 0, but by simply dragging these across to any position you want to, what I'm doing is adding value into your valuation. So at the moment, we can see the total valuation is £27,000. I've just added £13,000 in by moving that. And if you watch that blue number, it just simply adds it in, and that is the basis of your valuation. So let's say I've done the first fix and second fix. I've just added £20,000 into my valuation, which is 72% of that piece of work. And imagine walking around site now with an iPad. Really easy to do. Potentially, depending on your business, you could be using other people in your organization to do this. So site managers, contract managers, if you felt that was appropriate. But the minute you save that change, it tells me we've done 72%, and that now is, as I say, updated the valuation. Something else you can also do there is you can start to attach within here issues. And an issue is a very loose term, but that could be snagging, or it could be health and safety, or it could be any category you want. There's some example categories there in here for me. So it could be contra charges, or it could be delay evidence, or it could be progress, or it could be quality. These are just examples, but essentially what you're doing is you're creating a snag or an issue within the software associated to that project, but more specifically to that particular work package and zone. So having done all that, and when we walked around site and updated your progress, what the software will now do for you is produce a progress report for you. One other thing to show you actually before we go on to that actually is you have another tool here, which is a progress map, which is quite a powerful way of visualizing your project. So what you're seeing here is a chart which shows you the value and the status of your project. So we can see very clearly that we have a dry lining work package here. We have done £168,000 of that work out of a projected total of £404,000. And then we've got the ceilings work package here where we can see we've done 106K out of 230. So this is a status of the work you've done. As you zoom in, you can then see it starts to break it down into all the different levels or zones that you've defined, where red means it's not yet started. So level 4 and level 5 we can see haven't yet started. Levels 2 and 3 are both blue, so they are work in progress, and level 1 is green, so is nearing completion. So all you need to do with these is really drill in, and you can then see the status of all the different items of work you're doing in that zone, and you can go backwards and forwards to your heart's content. But that's the principle behind that. It's a visualization of the whole project in a very graphical way. So having walked around site and updated your progress, you can then export from here your internal progress. Okay. So what I'm producing for you here is a summary of that particular work. So if we look at the dry lining progress, and this is our internal position, there's all the items that are in the bill on this particular project with all the different fixes or component names, the overall value, and then for each zone, so if we look at level 1, you can see you've got a quantity, percentage completed, and therefore the value at that point. And as we go across, you can see that could be quite a lot of data on a big project, but that's fully automated for you based on the percentages that you put in. And the key there is that's managed for you and developed automatically, but that is your internal true position, broken down by package. If you have any variations in the project, it will include all your variations as well. In this particular case, we don't have any, but everything is all included there within your internal valuation. And I think the key thing here is that this is then the basis against which you can then measure all your subcontractors. So if your subcontractor says he's done 70 or 100% of this work on level 3, the software knows and has recorded that actually you've only updated that you've done 75%, so that will flag that as a warning immediately that they are potentially overbooking on measure. And then the final thing here is that this will then produce for me a preview of the application for payment. So if I did want to produce an application at this point, based on my updated progress, this is giving me a snapshot of what that would look like. So you can see in the top, you've got a breakdown of your work packages. You can see you've got your contract scope and any variations there are all broken out into 2 separate columns. You therefore have a total of the work done so far with a percentage. And in this case, we can see the subtotal is £275,000. We also have materials on site totaling £8,700. And we have a separate webinar which you may have attended, which looked at procurement. But what the software is doing is calculating the unused materials, which is really what you've ordered less what you've fixed in place. And it's calculating that for you, should you wish to include it. Therefore, a total of 283. In this case, we haven't produced a previous application, so this first application will be for £283. So it's giving you that level of detail if you wish to produce your application at this point. What it's also doing here is giving you an update on your CVR. So at any point we want to, having updated the site progress, we can then see our value or our progress as a percentage for the whole work package within this project, and also our cost as well. And we can compare those. So that's the basis of your CVR essentially. Your value and your cost is being updated for you. But let's say now we want to produce the application for payment. All we then do is go to the application section, and this is where we can produce all our applications for this project over time. And again, you can see the preview, so we can see there that there's the 283. And if I was to now hit the generate outgoing application button, that will generate the application for me, but it will do it based on those internal values you've just seen. But let's say, for example, you wanted to overbook for the reasons we've talked about, which could be either projecting value to the month end or bringing more cash into the project sooner. What you can then do is start to override those. So if, for example, on ceilings, we can see these values now you're seeing here are the values that are currently in the application based on those progress sliders. But if, for example, on level 3, you wanted to claim the full amount, you can override these at any stage you want to. So we can see that based on progress, we've done 100% of metal, 0% of board, 0% of plastering, but there's nothing to stop me manually overriding those. And that's now where you're starting to see this difference between the internal value and the external value. We can add that to the application, and that therefore means that we've just added now a whole lot of extra money into the application. And then you simply, whenever you're ready, you generate your application on that basis. And all you do for that is you simply hit that button and it produces it for you. It is worth just mentioning that you can have various sort of control options here. So for example, if you're doing residential work, we know that clients very often can't claim any money for a piece of work until it's fully completed. So you can set different kind of thresholds here. For example, if you say it must be 100% complete to be included in the application, then that's exactly what the software will do. But you can set different trigger levels if you choose to. And ultimately, all you then do is you generate the application, and in the background, that is generating the application for payment for me. And that will appear here. Actually, in fact, I've got one. Okay, so the application looks like this. So you've got a cover sheet, which itemizes all the key figures. So we can see we've got a breakdown of the packages with all the variations, all the materials on site, if there are any, overall value done, total applied, progress, etc. So in this case, we're applying for £359,000. But then, as you'd expect, there's a lot of detail behind that. So if your client questions, well, where does that £223,000 come from? Then you can go straight to each work package, and each one has a specific sheet. Go to dry lining, and that's where you can then start to see everything in quite a lot of detail. You've got all the different work scope items here broken down across all the different zones you've defined in the project, and zones can be anything at all. In this case, they're sort of levels, if you like. You've got your original tender information, so it's a remeasure contract, so these are the values and the rates you tendered on. You've got any differences that may have occurred between tender and now if it is a remeasure contract, and then you've got your live on-site quantities and so on. And you can see in the last column you've got your progress and then your applied value. Scroll to the bottom, and that's where these figures then come from. And this is fully automated for you. There's no risk of error because it's done for you. All the variations, as I say, would appear within there if you had any, and also all your materials on site would appear within here as well. So that's really how you then produce the application for payment. Once you've then got an application, it's all managed within the software here. So if you wanted to produce an application at any point at all, you can. And then once you've sent that to your client, okay, you can then mark it as sent, which means it's been tagged as one that's gone out to your client now, and you're waiting for them to come back and certify it. And then when they come back to you with a pay less notice or with a payment certificate, that's when you can then start to put your approved or your certified figures in here, so you can track all this. So for example, if you pick a date, let's say it's valid to the 1st of July was the effective date, so we're looking for the June period, put in a value. So again, you can either say it's been approved as per the applied values, or it could be apportioned if they give you a reduced value or whatever. There's different options here. You can put in notes against it, you can put in attachments of the payment certificate and so on, and ultimately that then gives you a breakdown of what they've certified against the application. So immediately we can see here, up to the period of 1st of July, we've applied for 297, and I've just approved the same amount, but obviously that could be a reduced amount. It's calculated your retention based on your project agreed retention rates. It's calculated the VAT, again, at whatever rates you've got set up for the project, and it's also got any CIS in there. So it's working out the payment that is due. So that's the process of producing the application and certifying it. And then of course, the final thing is you'll want to track all this. So this is very much within this particular contract. We could see over time a number of applications appearing over a number of different months. But if we go back now and think about Chalkstring as a more holistic product for managing your business, if I go to the accounts section of the software, this is then going to give me more of an overview of the whole business rather than just one contract. So if I go to the supply and fit applications, this is a big data list of all your applications from the beginning of time of using Chalkstring. Each of them has an application number. Obviously, you can filter by different internal company, projects, clients, status, date ranges if you wish to. And you can apply these filters quite happily. You can put in whatever you want here. If I go in for, I don't know which ones I've got in here. Let's go for 1990. So that project, Queen Mary Hospital, 1990, I can see those are the five applications that have gone in over that time period for that project. And what you're then getting here, of course, is a total amount applied for and a total amount approved or certified over that period. And you can see it's also calculating things like outstanding values, payments that are due, retention, CIS, etc. And all that information is being calculated. So you can, at any point you want to, come in here, search by project or search by status. You say, well, show me all my approved applications. So these are all the applications that have gone out and have been certified. So therefore, by definition, I'm expecting payment for all these applications. So it's really about tracking that level of information, having instant accessibility to the status of every application in your project. So going back into the PowerPoint, because that's the demonstration pretty much covered for today's session. There's obviously a lot more behind it. We're happy to go into more detail if you wish us to at any stage. Just thought it was worth ending up with a couple of slides about sort of typically who uses Chalkstring. You may be able to identify yourself in this sort of way. Really, our key focus with the product at this point is really mainly about specialist subcontractors. So regardless of the trade, whether it's fit out, whether it's roofing, flooring, decorating, screeding, partitioning, all those sorts of different trades and others, groundworks, those sorts of things. Those are our sort of core focuses. Any company that's really buying materials, paying labor, whether it's subcontract or direct, putting a markup on it and selling that service on really is the key to this software. Some names there that you may recognize depending on your trade or depending on your geography. Those are the sorts of customers we're working with. Quite a range there in terms of size of customers and also in terms of geography and trade, ranging from sort of facades to dry lining to interior office fit out to a whole range of things, as I say, groundworks, decorating, a whole range of things there. And we can give you case studies to support this if you want to. So if you're on our website, you can download these anytime you want to. There's case studies and there's referrals and references from existing customers who'd be happy to talk to you if you wanted to find out more about the software. And so really to summarize, the main benefits from a valuations perspective with Chalkstring really is, number one is productivity. Hopefully you've seen the time savings you can get there by simply walking site, producing evaluation and then hitting the application button. It's very quick, very automated, and therefore very time effective at the end of the month. It will give you consistency across your business. So rather than having lots of different reports, having to interpret each one, it'll give you a standardized way of reporting all these key information. It does cover both the internal and the external valuation. Hopefully you've seen that. Yes, they can be the same, but very often, of course, they are different. And hopefully I've shown that amply of how you can coexist those two. Clearly, anything that's automated and that's driven by software will reduce and indeed eliminate the human aspect to it. And things like variations is a big one there. You know, it won't or can't miss variations simply because once they're in Chalkstring, they're in Chalkstring. They appear in the application. So it de-risks the human element of it in terms of correctness and missing things. Obviously, it gives you total transparency. Hopefully you've seen that. Every single application can be viewed, tracked, accessed in a central database. Giving you accessibility to data. So being a cloud-based system, this is about walking the site and creating these valuations on the fly. I had a client the other day who was on a very big job for a main tier 1 main contractor, put in an application for 1.2 million, having just walked site with an iPad, got back to the site office, and 5 minutes later the application had gone to the client even before I'd taken my boots off. So it's that speed, that accessibility of this kind of data, and that was a 1.2 million pound application for payment. And obviously flexibility, and potentially there's the opportunity here to use your staff more effectively. So I've mentioned it a couple of times, but we are increasingly seeing site managers and contracts managers generally getting involved more in this process, even if they don't submit the application for payment, certainly driving the progress and the internal value to help the surveyors in that process. So those are the main benefits purely on the valuation side of things. Clearly Chalkstring is a lot more than just valuations, as we've already covered. So thank you very much for your time. Well, sorry, it's over half an hour. So just have a look, if you have quick questions. I'm not going to go into lots of these because I'm conscious of time. I have gone over the half an hour. Just see what, hang on 2 seconds, see what we got. There's quite a few questions come in. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll pick the first two, run through those, and then anyone else who's sent questions that we haven't answered, we'll get back to you personally as always with these things to make sure you get answers. So the first question relates to account software, which I haven't really gone into. The question is, what account software do we link to and how does it work? Briefly, because I'm obviously not got huge amounts of time here, briefly, what the software will do is it will enable you to batch export information to any accounts package. So we've set this up to be very neutral. I mean, the most common accounts package is Sage, without any question. And obviously, there's different flavors of Sage, but Sage 50 is the most commonly used version of Sage we come across. But it could be you're using QuickBooks, Xero, Evolution, CIA. You know, there's a whole host of different account systems. So what you do here is within Chalkstring is you can export out anytime you want to a batch of information via a CSV file into an accounts package. So your accounts team can pick up that information and run with it. So in the terms of applications, which is what we've been talking about today, this is going to pump through the total applied value, the certified value, the CIS calculation, the retention, all that information goes across into the account software. And it's worth saying as well, actually, it will take through approved invoices for procurement and approved labor subcontract payments as well. So all that information is pushed through into the account software via the accounts export there. So I'm skipping through that, but there's a bit more behind it, but it will talk to any accounts package is the message in a very simple way. Second question, and the last one I'll cover now is variations. So someone said, what about variations? Again, haven't really covered variations, but it's worth just saying. So going back to that same project, you can put in variations within a variations work package if you prefer, if you want to put them all together, or you could put them within other work packages. But ultimately, when you go to your variations and you define in here what your variations are, instantly that will automatically put that variation onto your application for you. So again, you can't miss it, it's fully automated. But on top of that, actually, if you put a variation in, it will also calculate the material you need, the labor you need as well. So it's just totally linked. But in terms of this webinar today, by putting a variation into the scope of works up here, automatically that will appear within the variations worksheet. As I say, we've got a bunch of other questions, but guys, I've got to call it a day for timing here. Trust me, we will get back to you individually on your questions, but thank you very much indeed for all your questions. Hope you found that a useful session. If you wish to know more about Chalkstring, or have any specific discussions you want about this part of it, or you want a full demonstration of the whole product, please do contact us, hello@chalkstring.com, or our phone number there, and we'd be very pleased to have a talk with you. So thanks very much indeed for looking at the latest webinar in our series, and we look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.